Welcome back to the Woodgrafter, second part in our mini-series building a router table. It's all based on this rather wonderful router lift provided to me by Sauter Shop, and today we're going to install this beast. That sounds good? Stick around. So welcome to the second part in our mini-series. Last episode we had a look at the gear that Sauter Shop had kindly provided to us. Today we're going to install and set up that gear, and then the final episode we're going to build a small project to see how good the gear actually is. Full disclosure, Sauter Shop kindly provided the gear to me. They got in touch and said, hey, you're about to build a router table. Why don't you use our gear and see what you think? So they provided all the gear that we're going to use on a loan basis. If I don't like it, I box it up, they collect it, I never see it again and never talk about them again either. If it's good stuff, I can buy the gear and I can leave it in here and it will be used forevermore as part of the Woodgrafter workshop. No idea whether I'm going to return or buy. That's a decision we'll make at the end of the next episode once we've built a project with it. So today I want to see how easy it is to fit the gear into our top. So here's the workbench that we're currently building. We've already finished this side, we've already got the MFT inserts in place, and today I want to look at this side where our router table is going to be. If you are interested in this workbench, then the course is now available over on my website, www.thewoodgrafter.com. I'll leave a link in the notes, or just click on this one up here. So imagine this configuration on this table. It's just easy to weigh this up because I've got the holes on it. I'm going to mount the router lift somewhere around about there. I think that's a good space because I'm also going to put the MFT holes around this router, so I get a combined router lift and MFT top here to give me lots and lots of clamping flexibility, etc. So this is going to go about there. That gives me a nice working distance to the front, so I've got lots of stuff to support my material on. It gives me a lot of room at the back, so I can have quite a lot of adjustment on the fence that will come in to the back there. And overall, I think that's going to be pretty good. I'll be mounting a strip where these holes are on that panel there of this Incra track. This was not supplied by Sauter Shop, they do stock it, but I went for the Incra track because it matches my Incra fence. I'm really that sad, yes. So that will be mounted across there, and these two strips will then be mounted down that series of holes there and that series of holes there, and that gives me the runner for the fence. Now again, Sauter Shop will provide this. They do sell it on their store. I actually got this way before I built the router table, and I say it just matches my Incra fence. So you can see what I'm going to go for. So before I even mount this, I'm going to drill this series of holes that you can see on that one over there, and I'm going to route the slots for these two end pieces. So I think the reason why I'm routing the holes is pretty obvious. It gives me lots of clamping opportunities. But the reason I'm dropping these T-tracks in here is because these actually take my MFT clamps. So that gives me more clamping opportunities when I start to build the frame that I will use to route this out, the template to route this out. So in the router table, these strips here are going to do a dual purpose. Yes, primarily it's about the fence, but it also gives me clamping options. Now you saw me use the trend jig in a recent video. You've not seen that, go and check it out here. So I'm not going to go through how I actually route the holes. I'm just going to crack on and get the job done. Okay, so that trend jig made short work of that, and you can see I've now got the series of MFT holes inside here, but I've got the blank where our router table is going to sit. Now in order to make this groove, I'm obviously just going to use my router. So set up my festool rail in those dog holes we just made, so I know this front edge is now parallel to these holes, which is perfect. And I know I've got my center point because it was 96 millimeters from the center point of the holes we just drilled under that rail. This is 20 millimeters, so I need a 20 millimeter channel, and I'm going to run the channel from the back of the panel to that front line. So what I've done, I've flipped my rail around, picking up the same series of holes that I picked up on that side. Everything else is the same. I'm using the same settings left to right on this. So this groove here will come out exactly the same position as that groove in relationship to that series of dogs. And with those two in place, I can now just drop this back in. Look at that, gorgeous. Now tighten these down. Next job is I want to put the main start of the show in place, which is going to be this baby here. I think it's quite obvious how it works. We route a profile that's going to take this inset. We've got this thickness here that we need to allow for, and obviously we need to take the center of the table out. So first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to route a profile that gives me the thickness of this. And don't forget, I'm also using this metal frame, so I actually need the thickness of the aluminium and that little metal insert as well, so whatever that is. But working out the depth is really quite easy. What's more complicated is working out the template. Now you can buy from the Sauter shop a ready-made routing jig that will allow you to route this out perfectly using a pattern bit. We can make one. Making a template is pretty easy. Come with a couple of straight pieces, bring them up to the thing that you want to route out, which will be there and there. Cut some more stock that would come through this middle piece here and the same here. Screw that together and you've got your template made for that. Super, super simple. If you're posh like me, you can come in with your Festool MFS rail, which is exactly what I'm going to do. Now we've already decided that the front of the router lift is going to line up with the front of these holes, which is great. So that means that's just going to fit into there against that line, like so, which is awesome. But I now want to say, where does this want to be left and right? Obviously, I want it to be in the center, which is that row of holes there. And that is more or less the center. So now I can bring in my template and I can just set it for the right size. So making a template or using one of these speed templates like I'm using here, the right size depends how you're going to route this out. I'm going to use a 30mm bush in my router and I'm going to use a 20mm router bit. So the offset for my router is 5mm. 30mm bush minus 20mm router bit is 10mm, 5 either side of the router bit, 5mm. So I actually want to make this 5mm bigger than the area I want to route out to allow for that offset. Now because I use that combination of 30mm bush and 20mm router bit in a lot of my work, I've just made some 5mm shims. So I can take the object I want to route, I can drop the shims in, and then I can just tighten this into place. Now we've already made our mark of where the front edge is going to be. So I'm just going to come in now and just allow for that 5mm offset. So I'm just going to come in 5mm from that mark that we've made. So that can be now lined up against that front mark there. So we know where we're going to be front to back. So now we just need left and right. So this hole is actually come out at 35, 36, 37. So halfway point on this is going to be 37 divided by 2, which is 18 and a half. 16, 17, 18 and a half, which is going to be there. So I can line up that center point there. I can line up my front edge to that 5mm mark that we've just made. And that's the position that this baby needs to be in. So because somebody had the foresight of putting in some clamping positions, I can clamp that into place. With this in place, we can now start to think about routing this thing out. Now look at the metal insert frame. This is exactly the same profile as our router lift, and look at this massive big curve here. That's a 19.5mm radius. That's a 39mm diameter router bit to make that, and trust me, you don't really want to be using that size bit in a hand router. If you were using the standard insert, not going for the Craig one that I have here, and to be honest with you, unless you were dropping it into a Craig table, you wouldn't use the Craig one, you go for the standard one. That is actually a 6mm radius. That'll be a 6mm radius on your insert. I can't do that, and there's no way I'm going to use the best part of a 40mm bit. So what I've done, I've created for myself some plugins here, some nice little plugins And these are just 3D printed, and I just designed them to slide into the corner of this multifunction square, like, whoops, like so. Nice fit. And they are, no surprise, 19.5mm radius. Now the instructions say you need to use you need to leave a 20mm overhang for this to sit in to give it its strength. So my 20mm bit inside here is absolutely perfect for the job. So I'm happy with that. So the only thing that's left is to work out the depth of cut. I'm just going to drop the router onto the jig. And I'm going to bring it down and zero it out and lock it down. And now I can just adjust this post to give me the appropriate depth of cut. I'm just going to measure how thick this is with the backing bracket on, and it's 10.1mm. So I've got a 10mm shim, so I'm going to put a 10mm shim under here and say bang, you're perfect, you're locked down. So I'm going to lift this up by about 1mm, so that will give me an 11mm depth, and I can just do that using this adjuster here. So that's now set for 11mm, so I can now plunge down to the 11mm mark. Now obviously using 11mm when I only need 10.1 means that everything will sit slightly lower than the table. But that's okay, because part of the design of that particular router lift, there's some bushes, some little grub screws that come down, and that allows me to lift the entire thing back up again to level it out. So I want to be slightly lower than the overall surface. At least that's what the instructions tell me. Okay, so now I can just use that little template there to drop in, and look at that, absolutely perfect. And those nice corners, those sort of inserts that I made there, those round corners, work pretty well. Not a bad job at all. So now what we need to do is to cut out that middle section here, and we are good to go. So I've got the hole roughed out, just coming in with my metal insert, and I just want to make sure that, and I'm just sort of drawing around that so I know what I need to do next. Now as you can see by my appalling cuts there, I'm really rubbish with a jigsaw. That's the tool that I hate with a passion inside a workshop, the jigsaw. I managed to rough out okay, but now I want to make this a little bit neater. So I'm thinking I might come in with the router again and just finish that off. And what you end up with is, in theory, a nice profile. I just caught it a little bit with the router there, stupidly, as I was turning the router off, but oh, hey ho, not to worry. So that should now fit into there nicely. Can't say better than that, can you? And then this should slot nicely into there as well. What do you think? And as predicted, it's a little bit low, but that's okay. So now I want to mount these underneath. They sort of kind of just slot into those corners like so. So the first thing I want to do while I'm here, I'm just going to drill down through these holes here so we can see where we are. Then I'll take the top out, turn it over, and we'll look at doing some strengthening and positioning on the other side. Now obviously this is quite thin now, and there's a lot of weight going into the router, so I want to strengthen this hole. So I'm going to take some thin strips of this wood here, and I'm just going to build a frame that goes around this router insert, and then I'm going to glue and screw that little framework in place, and that's just going to give me, you know, a little bit of strength around that edge there. Now I can just use that hole that we've just made to line up the position of those corner brackets, and you can see that that's going to pull quite nicely into those pieces we've just put on. And finally, I just want to put some screws here in the middle, a couple here, maybe a couple here, maybe a couple there, a couple here. And that's just to make sure that these are all firm as it dries, the glue. And then in theory, we turn this over. Ooh. And we have a nice firm seat for our table. And now all things being equal, this should drop into there nicely. Perfect. Now I just want to drop the grub screws in. So in the kit, it comes with some grub screws here. So let's just get those out. Now obviously the job of these is to fine tune the position of your table. So they just push down onto that metal plate. And I've actually got 2 more than I need, which is great because I guess they're quite easy to lose. And what I want to do now is just adjust these so that this is flush with the black surface. So I'm just going to wind it back. There. There. That one's okay. That's a bit shallow, so wind it up. Good. Wind that one back a bit now. Yep. Bit shallow here. Good. Wind that one up. Good. Wind that one back a bit now. Just keep checking yourself. And that was, I think we're good. I think we are good. And then I just want to drop these bolts in. I'm not tightening these down super tight just yet. I'm leaving them a little bit, you know, just little nip it up, I think, with the expression. Because I'm not quite finished calibrating. Okay, I'm going to put my piece of stock. From there I can feel it just binding. So I'm just going to slacken this off, which is why I didn't do it too tight. A little bit there and there. And I'm going to just lower these down, the screws down a little bit. That's good. That's good. Then tighten these down. That's good. And obviously I'll keep checking the adjustments because it will slip, I think, as things settle down, but we'll get it to the right place and it should be reasonably stable. So the next job is just to inset the front mitre channel, and that's going to run from the end of the bench there to probably just into here. That should give me quite a lot of room on the mitre gauge as I enter and exit the cut on the router. So I want this to line up with the centre point of that hole, and we know that the centre point of that hole is 96mm from the centre of that next row. Now I've already got the centre points here because we found those when we were doing this insert. So if I come down from those marks, 96mm, this should line up. So 96. Now we know that this is wider than 20mm. This is about 29mm. So I'm going to use the Festool rail and the rail attachment. So we'll use those 2 holes. I'll line this up onto those 2 holes and lock it in. And then I'll use the adjustments to give me that centre point that we've just found there. And then I'm going to route from that end of the bench all the way through to here. I don't want to route into this black top. I want to stop here. So I'm just going to drop this tabletop out and then I can come straight along. So I'm lined up to the centre point, 20mm router bit inside there. This is locked down. Just going to zero everything off. Find my depth of cut, which is going to be, he says, there. So we'll route the centre point first of all, and then I'll adjust in this direction, and then we'll adjust in this direction. And if we've been lucky enough and good enough, that should be a nice fit. And look at that. Don't you just love it when things work out? So now you can see I've got this rather nice mitre groove set up here. So there you go. we now have a router module inside our workbench. Obviously that was a very edited version of how I did that. That's available as one of the modules inside the workbench course. We go into quite a lot of detail about how I did that, so if you're interested, check out the course, www.thewoodgrafter.com. But now let's get the stuff assembled and see what it looks like. Now pretty much everything in this range comes pre-assembled. There's no assembly to do on the router lift itself. Obviously there's no assembly to do on the router, so it's just a matter of dropping the router into the router lift. This is the front, so when you reach in you're going to grab those black handles, so this is the front, so it makes sense that we put the volume control towards the front. Now I love details like this. That wrench that we looked at before for adjusting the height, it's the same size as the bolts that you use to fasten in the router. How nice is that? It's this collet here, this 43mm one, that just slots into place. And then you just tighten down on the clamp at the front. Make sure that's nice and tight, you don't want it moving. And just line it up so it looks good. Which is about there. And that's purely so I can get access to the speed controller when it's underneath the bench. Okay, cool. And that's it. The router is now installed. How simple was that? Now I'm going to drop the router lift into the bench, and don't forget we've used the kit so we can actually access this from the top. So I'll drop off these bolts. I just put these in here for safekeeping. And now it should be a matter of dropping through the power cable, lifting this over, positioning that in the hole, and that fits into there beautifully. And I'm loving the fact I can do all of this from above the bench. I'm not messing about underneath. Just got a piece of wood. Now I have the weight on it, I'm just checking we're all still okay. Maybe this front one needs to come down a little bit here. And now I can lock this down. Good job. So once you've got your table done, it's that easy to drop that in and out. That's super fast. Now that's important because it's got the thread underneath it. One thing we know about routing, it makes a lot of dust. There's no dust collection underneath this yet. If I keep this in the shop, I will build a dust container underneath it at some point as a future project. And obviously if that thread on the lift gets clogged up, it will ruin some of its abilities, which I don't really want to happen. So it's great that that's so easy to lift out. And don't forget, let's put an insert in. Super simple. You may have noticed there, I've actually just dropped these little metal shims on that came with the kit. They just snap into place on top of the rare earth magnets, and that's just enough thickness there to give me a nice smooth entry and exit on that plate. Fantastic. Let's put the fence on. Attaching this fence is super simple. You take the long slide bolts, there's only 2 of those in the kit so you can't mistake them. They slide into your standard T-channel like so. Your fence has got these 2 long slots in, so they just go over those bolts. I'm just going to line it up so it's central-ish with the router. You've then got these 2 white spacers, one there and one there, and then you bring in the wing nuts. And that tightens down. The bolt on this one is slightly bigger on the head than the bolt on this one, so I might just file that down at some point because this one moves beautifully. This one's got a bit of resistance, and I did try the bolts in each track, and obviously the problem moved from one track to the other, so I know my tracks are good. So a little bit of error there on the machining on the bolts, but nothing significant. Now interestingly, the fence hasn't come with any instructions, so I'm just doing here what feels right. So we're using these are the flat head screws. They look about M6-ish, ish. And obviously you've got the recessed cutouts on your white fences. They just simply drop in. There's 2 slots on the fence. They go through. A couple of black washers on the back. 1, 2, and then some more of these black wing nuts. And that's super simple. That now adjusts and tightens down. Same on the next one. We have this guard, obviously safety guard. Just take off the backing paper, one assumes. And then that just slots onto this T-rail at the front that I was so excited about before. This has got 2 bolts as well. And 2 more wing nuts. And that will just slot into that T-rail. And then the final one is the dust extractor. And there's a small screw here that just holds that into place. And that's it. It's in. It's that simple. So in terms of assembling this, super simple. The router lift, fantastic quality. It holds that router incredibly well. The router itself, we think is going to be good quality. The fence is sort of kind of mid-road quality for me. There's nothing to offset things in this T-rail from fouling into the fence. Even the supplied safety fence here is coming out at an angle. It's putting that under strain. And I do think if that had been machined to be exactly the same depth as this recess on the fence, that would have been perfect. The bolt on this side, head is slightly thicker than the bolt on this side, so it just gives me a little bit of resistance as I'm moving it. Everything else, pretty good. Yeah, but it'll do the job. It'll do the job. Changing the router all happens above the top here. So I can unlock this. I can then raise up this. And this is beautifully smooth. Wowzers. Reaching those handles underneath, yep, is really easy. So there's the red ones. So that slides back into reasonably easily. I've got it set on that stop, so in theory that should be in the center, and I think it is. And that was factory preset. I've not had to adjust that at all, so it looks like it comes calibrated from the workshop. So that's now in the center. But I say there is an adjustment underneath that. Once you've got it where you want it to, just lock in the red levers we saw before. Happy days. Coming to the front, the black levers, just knock both those down, grab the motor, and look at that. Super easy. Now, even though this is a heavy router, it does actually stop in those positions. Okay, so you just set the position you want with that angle and lock it down. These two 22mm spanners obviously gives you very easy access. So if I wanted to change the chuck over, I can do that pretty simply. Now with the kit you get the 8mm collet. I've also got the optional 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch collet, but I've only got one union nut. Now you can buy the union nut as a separate item, an optional item. It would have been nice if it had come with the collets that you order. Now you can knock the collet out, put it into a convenient hole, 20mm hole, get some sort of small knocking stick and just carefully knock the edge. Easily just tap out that centre collet. Like so. And then you can easily tap in the next collet. Put the 1/2 inch back in. What I'm going to do, I'm going to buy some more union nuts. I don't want to mess around doing that all the time. Once you've got it tapped in, it's nice and tight. Just comes into the top there and screws down. Happy days. But if I were buying this in the shop, I think I would buy a couple of extra union nuts. So each of my collets would have a union nut, so I've not got to mess around tapping that out all the time. You could probably damage it over time, I imagine. The other great thing about this is a standard thread. So if you're using routers that apply to standards, like my Festool one, my collets fit from the Festool system as well. But that might be worth bearing in mind, that it does take collets from other router systems, assuming they're all standard, of course. Probably not something I would do. If I was putting this here, I'd have dedicated collets for this, probably lined up somewhere over there, easy to reach. So we'll drop the 1/2 inch in. And I'm going to try it, I think. And I'm going to try it with this beast. This is not the full test. This is a router bit I've never been able to use because it was always too big for the festival table. I've got bigger router bits than this I've also never used, but let's just give this one a go. In theory, I can just nip that up with the spanners. Just raise up a bit so it's not on the very, very base. Well, that's super easy, isn't it? I can now bring that down. Drop in our guard. Look at that. And you can see it's centered well, can't you? That just fits in nicely. Just put that into the appropriate position. Now I can just lock that down. I'm going to put the fence somewhere in the middle for now. I've just dropped a UK plug onto my safety switch, so that can now go into there for the time being. If this stays in the workshop, that will be mounted onto the bench. Just going to set this down to a low rev per minute because it's a large router bit, it's dead easy to access that, so that's all the way down to 1. That is now turned on. Just going to stand off to one side. Whoa, that is quiet, man. That's running at its lowest rev, can you hear it? There's the background noise in my shop. I'll keep quiet for 1 second. So the average background noise in my shop, 34.3, maximum 42.6, and that's with the car just going back outside just as I decided to do that. I'm going to start this again and we'll see what we get. $64.7. So that is unbelievable. It's only about 20 decibels higher than the ambient sound in my shop. So my word, that is impressive. There you go. Now, I wouldn't normally take a cut that deep in one pass. I just wanted to play. Dust extraction seems quite cool, considering I've not really connected that up properly. Yeah, there's a bit of fallout underneath as you'd expect, but that's really, really quite good. We've now got a working router table, not too shabby at all. Early indications looking really, really positive. If you are interested in this, go and look at the Sauter store link here. If you are going to purchase something from them, when you get to checkout, just add the Woodgrafter sent you and you'll get some sort of free gift. Somebody got in touch with me after the last episode and say, hey, I've done that. And what they've done is they've added a cup to my order. I've got one of these cups as well. Really, really nice. Nice thermal cup. Metal inside, nice wood finish on the outside, and Sauter Shop down there. Also, the other thing they tend to give away are these rulers that we looked at last time. So that's it. So next episode, we're going to put this through its paces and we're going to make a small project. I'll see you soon.